Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we work to bring you stories of people around the world who are using technology, innovation, and just cool ideas to make life better for others. And as part of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors and 36,000 Rotary clubs around the world, we love stories about how improvement can happen across communities. So today we have speaking to us Niclas Dahl. And Niclas is the managing director of a company called Oceanbird that you will hear about. He has decades of experience in the marine industry with a focus on sustainable shipping. And I am excited that we have got him here to talk to us. So Niclas, I hand the microphone over to you. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley.
Thank you. So I will give you a short introduction of what Oceanbird is, what we are doing and what we want to achieve. Oceanbird is a company who was formed actually last year in December. So it's a quite new company. It's owned by Wallenius and Alfa Laval. Wallenius, who is a ship owner, and Alfa Laval, who is a major company within the marine industry. So we formed this company in order to create sustainable shipping using wind as the main propulsion or as a wind assist for large ships. So I will walk you through a little bit what we are doing. And I thought I will start up with showing a short animation of what we're actually doing, so you get a full view on that. So this is actually a car carrier that has done 4 wing sails, and this one can take up to 7,000 cars, and it's aimed to be built in 2026. I will now show you. So, I mean, this is how they are folded, then they are lifted up during sailing period. I will now show you how this works going forward. So basically the ship here have the wing, and the wing is then containing of one main sail and then a flap. So it's a little bit like an airplane wing, where we create the camber in order to get the full thrust going forward. And I will come back and show you more later on how this works. So now you got the first glance of what we are doing, and then is the question, why are we doing this? I mean, the shipping industry stands for around 3% of the total CO2 emissions in the world, and around 11% of the CO2 regarding transportation. So more or less similar as airplanes. But you should also then have in count that 90% of all the goods is transported on the sea. And of course, this is very important because this will then continue to grow. So that's why IMO, International Maritime Organization, they set up a goal in order to reduce the CO2 by 40%. So there are legislations coming into this, how to reduce. And of course, using wind is a very, very big portion of this. So we in Oceanbird, I mean, we have our vision, providing wings for a shipping revolution. So we really would like to change the whole shipping industry, going from fossil fuels and really using the wind and the wing technology going forward. And I think, I mean, when we talk about the shipping revolution, it doesn't mean that we will build 2 or 3 of those ships that you saw on the animation. It's really about also changing the existing fleet. I mean, you have 90,000 vessels out there. So if you're going to make a big impact and a big change, you of course need to address also the existing fleet going forward. So why is then wind the right way forward? We have put up 4 things that we see that is very, very important for this. And one is of course then to reduce the OPEX, the operating cost. So that means that you are less depending on oil, and of course uncertainties today on the future fuel prices. I mean, the fuel prices are today quite high. The option here is also then to use other types of fuel like ammonia, methanol, and so LNG. But of course, what are the prices now and what will the prices be in the future? You have a big uncertainty. And as far as we know today, I mean, the wind is free of charge. So that is, of course, a very, very attractive way to go forward. We also talk about zero emissions, because for using wind, we have no emissions like CO2, but you also reduce emissions like NOx and SOx and particles. That is also a big portion of a problem today in the marine industry. And also worth mentioning here is that you, of course, reduce the underwater noise. That also becomes a problem more and more regarding how whales are communicating to each other and so on. So there are a lot of positive effects also from the environmental point of view. When it comes to reliability, wind is a constant energy source. And I think when I started up, that was my first question. How can you say that wind are really reliable? You don't know how much wind it will be tomorrow. But I mean, what we can do is that we can route the different ships depending on which route they have. And then we can sail them in a simulation for the last 10 years. And then we know exactly on a year base how much energy you would get out of a sail for that route. So it's very constant on a yearly basis. Day to day, it can of course be not that reliable in that way. And I think this is also very important that it open up for hybrid solution. I mean, I mentioned also different types of fuels going into the future, but you don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. So this open up also the possibility to use wind. And then when there is no wind, or when the wind is too much, so you want to fold them down, then also you have the possibility to use other types of fuel as a hybrid solution. I think future-proof is also very important. You, of course, compliance regarding the legislation I mentioned. This is called CII, coming up during next year in the marine industry. And I think also when it comes to this with no infrastructure, because all different solutions that we look into today, more or less, has been done. If you talk about ammonia or other parts, LNG, you need to have pressurized tanks, you need to build up an infrastructure. The wind is there out to be harvested. So what are we talking about? This is a wing system. Looks like an airplane wing. And as I mentioned before, it has a mainsail and a flap. It's 40 meters high, and you can also see the person down there at the bottom. So it's quite big constructions. It's a hard sail. It's made out of fiberglass. The weight is less than 150 tons and 40 meters in diameter. So this is then a fully automatic system where we are going in and measuring where the wind comes from, and then we have an angle of attack, so we then rotate the sail in the right direction. So there is no person needing to understand how to sail. This is fully automatic and done from our side in order to get the optimum thrust going forward for it. Then I would say the most common question I get, yeah, great, how much do we get and what is the performance out of this? How much can we save in percentage? And really the boring answer is that it always depends, and it depends on many different factors. I would say we have 6 different factors and maybe there are more, but of course, operation. I mean, where is the ship operating? So are you going on the North Atlantic? You have a lot of wind. If you're going in the Suez Channel a lot, then you have less wind in those areas. So of course, it has very much to do with logistic and operations for the type of the ship. Uptime availability. If you're in port, of course, you will not have the same utilization of it. Human element. Are you willing to sail the ship also when the wind starts to come up to higher level? Automation, how much are you then going to optimize it. I mean, wind is a tricky part in that way. So it's always how much can you adjust, how often are you in the optimum area. Different vessel types, and then of course routes and winds. Are you willing to take small turns during a voyage in order to get an optimized? Are you willing to cross sail and so on? So that there are a lot of factors into this, and that's also the reason why I don't like when we talk about percentage, because if you put a wing sail on a small ship, of course you save a lot in comparison to the main engine. If you put it on a big VLCC, you save very little compared, because you have a very big engine. So what we normally try to discuss is more how many kilowatts are you saving in average. So in order to do that, I mean, we simulate different routes. So here you see 4 typical routes during the North Atlantic and Pacific. They are normally very good because you have high winds. When you cross the equator, you have less wind, and so on. So this is how we look into different parts. And if we then look at the savings from one wing sail, you see it's if you have a speed of 14 knots, you will have in average, this is called then the IMO route. So that's a defined route that is not really set for wind, or more like an average. And then you will be around 350 kilowatts. If you take then on the North Atlantic, you are closer to 500 kilowatts in that way. But this means also that, I mean, during certain time when you have the right wind, you will get up to 2 megawatt, to over 2 megawatt. And then of course you will have times when you have nothing. You will have being port, or you have no wind. So then of course so this is seen as an average in general. And if you translate that to what really matters in this, is really to how much fuel can you save and how much CO2 can you reduce. So if we take then this IMO route that is not really done only for sailing, so one wing sail save around 400 tons of fuel, and that means 1,200 tons of CO2 per year. So it's quite substantial. And if you then put 2 wings on, you will have the double of this. So that's basically the force you get out of the wing sail. However, we come to this point. I mean, we have today a 7-meter long prototype that we are sailing outside Stockholm. Here we can work on different automation strategies. We know how the wind behave, how to measure the wind, how to optimize the control system, working on that. So that has been a first step working for us. Next step now is we will set up a full-scale 40-meter high wind wing on land. So that will be done during next year. And then we will have the first onboard installation on an existing vessel with one wing sail during beginning of 2024. So this is the development to take it step by step. We'll have a smaller scale, move into a land-based, and then develop into an existing. And then we have the possibility to do all retrofit parts, but also on fully sailing ship going into the future. So it's really, really exciting times moving forward for this. So that was my presentation right now, and be happy if you have any questions or comments.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Niclas. We will jump right into the questions following a couple of quick introductions. So the group watching the video has already met Niclas, our speaker. My name is Rushton Hurley. I am the programs chair for the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley. We also have with us from the Rotary Club of Eugene Metropolitan in Oregon, Heather Edwards, and a good colleague in the Find Great Programs group that we are blessed to be part of. Niclas, your program has certainly lived up to that hope as well. I am really excited to talk about some of the elements that you brought up. So one of the pieces that you talk about is the difficulty of identifying averages, things like this, right? That there are different routes and there are different possibilities, and just sometimes the wind blows, right? However, when thinking about a system that essentially requires not too much, not too little wind, and then perhaps looking at the 4 routes that you identify in your slides, is there some sense of approximately how much of the time the sails would be deployed and be functioning at a level to where they're at least meeting kind of their energy requirements?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the different wind parts, I mean, we are defining, I mean, we are sailing the ship up to 22.5 meter per second wind. After that, we fold it for safety reason, and we also think that you don't want to have the wing sails up when you have winds above that level. It's extremely rare when you look into that I mean, it's a very short time or period in percentage that you're actually above. And then, of course, when you're on the lower side, it's also not very common, depending on where you are. But if you're on the Atlantic, you very, very often have the wind. But what we calculate normally is, I would say, an average is maybe around 70% you're sailing, and 30% you don't use the sail for different reasons. I mean, it could be too high wind, too little wind, or also when you're in the port. So that's basically, in average, I would say around 70% you're using the wings.
Okay. Now, as a follow-up, when you think about, I'm assuming, first of all, that you guys have been developing these technologies for years, right? And the last couple, 2-3 years, we've seen a lot more extreme weather, or at least we're hearing about a lot more extreme weather. And so I'm wondering if that has changed how you approach building the systems as you think about what you had considered before to be the average kind of weather conditions that ships might face versus perhaps what they face now. Is that part of how you guys have worked with your system to develop it for adapting to the current shipping industry?
I mean, when it comes to the extreme weather parts, that's I mean, short occasions when you have extreme weather parts. And I mean, in marine industry, you need to work with the class society, and they set up the rules. So, I mean, we have to design this up to 53, 54 meter per second, so you can stand up. So, and when you look into all of these different regulations, it's more like you go into an volcano and a tsunami, and you have ice at the same time. So you have to design for the worst scenarios, because it's always a safety issue in that way. I don't see that it has a big impact on the daily operations if you look at the climate change right now, because in average we don't see that the amount of wind is increasing or reducing over time. But of course you have the extreme part coming more and more common in that way, but we have not seen that in our models so far, that it has a huge impact on the routes in that way.
Got it. Heather, go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Rushton. Thank you, Niclas, for such an important presentation and even more important work. I'm wondering if this is a completely private sector enterprise, or are governments helping to fund some of the research and development for this to make this as expansive as possible?
Yeah, no, but as I mentioned, I mean, this was a company formed in December last year, but also, as was mentioned here before, we've been working on it for many years. So it started up as a research project 3 years ago, and it was funded by the Swedish government to look into make the complete vessel sailing. That was the animation that you saw. So that was a part of that. So the wing sails was a part of that research program, but then was also like routing, how to look into different logistic points of view. So how can you reduce the overall emissions on a ship? And with this concept, we say that we can reduce it up to 90% totally when you look into the complete chain. So it's not only the wings then we talk about routing, we talk about different other optimization of the hull and so on. So that has been going on for 3 years or even more. And I think Wallenius, they started to look in at wind parts 2005. So they've been thinking in these terms for the last 15 years and so on. Then last year it was more saying that, okay, now we see that we have the technology that we can then put out on on the whole fleet. So that's when we were then going into a commercializing way. Then it's a private company from Alfa Laval point of view and from Wallenius who joined forces to say, okay, let's bring it out to the market so everyone can use it.
And are you perhaps collaborating or looking to collaborate with other governments? I mean, this is something we all stand to benefit from, and we keep hearing questions like, why isn't anybody doing anything? Well, here's a company who is, and governments need to be supporting that, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, but there is a wind community also in general where you have a different possibility to work with other solutions and wind and also similar parts, and of course everyone there work quite close together, because it's also a way to, you need to change the mindset of the ship owners and of the whole industry part. And I would say, I mean, in general, the marine market is a quite conservative market. So you want to make sure that, okay, I know before I make the investment, does this really work, and so on. And I think what's really the difference right now with new legislations coming in is that you need to do something. I mean, you can't go on as you do today because legislation will not allow it. So, I mean, today you have different choices. You can either change the fuel to something differently. I mean, yeah, ammonia or some other part. You can reduce the speed of the vessel, because then you will also reduce the CO2. The problem with reducing the speed is that you will then end up in, if you're going to transport the same amount of goods, you need to build more ships. And then you can argue what is the benefit of that in the end. Or you need to find something other, like a wind solution that will then be more for sustainable shipping. And I think this is, I mean, now a lot of pieces comes together. You have legislation coming in. You have an oil price that goes sky high. You have, I mean, when you're building these ships now, you need to consider, I mean, what will the operating cost, what will the fuel cost be in 2030, 2040? And then, of course, when you look into using wind as a free energy source, it's, of course, very lucrative into that. So I think now we have a good business case. It's good for the environment, and it also very visualized in that way that you can really see that you are doing something in a good way.
I'll follow up on that idea as well. So I was curious also about kind of the role of subsidies for advancing the technology and the uptake of the technologies. But I'm guessing that as a matter of strategy for the company, the goal is to be able to make the case to a shipping company that the upfront costs of converting an existing ship can be recovered within an expected period of time based on articulated conditions, that so that even if there aren't subsidies involved, that it's to the advantage of the company to move forward on this. Is that part of the pitch, and what kind of time frame, probably under what conditions, would a company start thinking, hey, if we're going to recover our money in 10 years, we're going to be golden in 20, or whatever the basic arrangement might be?
Yeah, no, but I think, I mean, depending on what happened, of course, you need to look at the business case. How long return on investment do you have on these parts? And of course, for us, the shorter time you have to make the return on investment, the better it is, because you have a stronger business case. And I think that's, for us, very, very important to make sure that it's lucrative. I think these 10 years, I mean, if you take that as an average, would be very lucrative for many. I think we will do even more in that way. But it also depends on what you calculate into that. Because, I mean, if you play with the idea that you have a CO2 tax coming up with that, then maybe you're down to 4 years or 3 years regarding this. I mean, what will happen? What if you put in what is the alternative? Buying more ships. Okay, then maybe you have a return on investment of very, very short period of time, because it's a very costly investment to buy new ships. So it a little bit depends on what you put into the calculations, I would say.
Heather.
I think you addressed this, but I'm wondering if you could speak more specifically to different sizes. So if you have, I understand adapting to different wind conditions and different routes, but what about I have no experience with marine transport, so forgive me if this is poorly formed question. But if you are perhaps going through rivers instead of along shorelines, are there different sizes that allow for more transport in more places with different conditions?
Yeah, no, but I mean, we want them to make them as big as possible so you get as much trust as possible. I mean, that's the number one part. Then, of course, you need to look into each and every ship. I mean, what kind of stability? I mean, because you will generate a lot of force, so you need to make sure that it's stable. You will not enter into other problems in the marine industry on the ship doing that. The sizes are maybe not the biggest issue on the height part, because I mean our are foldable, so we put them down on deck, so you can still go under bridges and all of that. So it's more the total weight and how you put them on. If you take a bulk vessel, for instance, I mean they also have normally the bridge where you have dry cargo. They normally have the bridge at the back of the vessel, which means that if you put a sail in front, okay, then you need to make sure that you have the line of sight so you can see, and then maybe you can do a smaller in order to have the right sight and so on forward. So I mean, there will be different kind of sails for different types of ships in the future. But we start to make the first one, and then we will most probably build more a portfolio around that as a second step.
Very cool.
So I have to ask, on your last slide, the image that it shows includes a thing that says the ABBA voyage. And for those of us who remember and danced to the music of ABBA, what is the connection to the music group?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, but it's we have Wallenius, who is one of our mother, have done a partnership with ABBA Voyage. And it was ABBA who then approached and said that, okay, we are really into environmental thinking, environmental logistics, and we like this idea with Oceanbird and working. So can we find a partnership on how to work with this? Because also this ABBA Voyage that they set up now in London, it's very much about new technology, and also sustainability, logistic, and so on. And then, of course, it's great. You have a Swedish company. I mean, Oceanbird is a Swedish company, and you have a Swedish pop group in that way. It's a little bit unusual in that way, but a very, very exciting cooperation. I think that we are sharing the same ground of I mean, the team here is really working on the sustainability part. I think what drives our whole company is to change the world, to make the world a better place in that way. And I know that we share that values with ABBA, and so that's the part of it.
Wonderful. A final question before we shift to finishing the recording. I was intrigued at your comment during the presentation about the effect that using more wind power has on ocean noise, in particular, the effects that such ocean noise might have on whales.
Mm-hmm.
As you think about the process to get to where you are today, being able to describe the varying benefits of the technology as you've laid it out, where in the process was this realization related to whales? I mean, was it at the very beginning? Someone said, we need to create less noise in the ocean. We should use more wind. Hey, wait a minute, let's talk about wind. Or was there something else in how the conversation developed over time that got you to pitching this particular idea for a business?
Yeah, no, I mean, what we want to do is sustainable shipping. I mean, and that has been the driving force. And of course, the big portion there has been regarding CO2 emissions. You already have today legislations regarding NOx and SOx and different particles, a little bit what comes up of that. When you come into this and you start to look into, then you also start to understand more what are other problems in the marine industry and these kind of things. And then it comes up more and more regarding this with noise, because I mean the engines in that way steer out the whale when they are talking to each other. So they're talking about having like blue lines where you're not allowed to go with the engine and so on in order to reduce this part in the future. And then of course this fits very well into that part and will be an extra driver part. But I mean the main starting point from it was really around the air emissions and so on.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I will hand it back to you in a minute for a final word. But for all of you who have joined us in the recording today, thank you for being part of it. And as you look at the different things that you encounter on our website, we hope you will do a couple of things. First of all, leave your thoughts. So there's a forum at the bottom of the page where you can share your ideas on this presentation, this recording, as well as other elements of the meeting that you'll find every week at the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. There's also an attendance form that we would like you to fill out. Just let us know you're here. We won't spam you or anything like that. We just want to be able to get a sense of what our reach might be, and we would appreciate that from you. After we finish the recording, we'll keep talking to Niclas, because that's one of the big benefits of being part of the live recordings, that you get to keep talking to these interesting people that we encounter. But we always like to hand it back to our speaker for a final word before we finish the recording itself. And so I will do that now. Niclas, I hand the mic back to you. What would you like to pass along to the viewers?
Yes, I made a summary of what I think is the three key points for Oceanbird. I think it's very important to start to act fast. I mean, for the environmental point of view, it's very often we talk about future technology, the future fuel, future this and so on. But I think it's important to understand, I mean, this is technology that is available already today, and it's important to start up and really move this forward in a fast way in order to meet the legislation and the targets going in 2040 and 2050. So I think that's a very, very important part. Then a little bit we were mentioning and discussing this with the business case. I mean, if you're going to create a true sustainable shipping, it has to be a little bit fun in that way, win-win, but win-win situation where you can it must be an incentives to really go into to do this. And I think this is also in place. I mean, you have the high oil prices, you have these kind of things where you will also make a benefit moving into this situation. So I think this is a very, very important to really change the whole industry. And then, of course, I mean, last but not least, I mean, have in mind that wind solution solves more than only the CO2 emission. I mean, we talk about a lot of other parts that you also get here. So I think these are, for me, if I would say three takeaways, the main one. And then I can also just mention also that, I mean, if you're interested more in Oceanbird, we have a homepage for theoceanbird.com. So you can always go there or ask questions to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niclas, and thank you, everyone. We will see you next week.